All right, here we are in Julian, California, the old mining town up here in the Cuyamaca Mountains. Let's take a look at the Julian marker here. Town founded in 1870. And of course, there are a lot of ghost stories here in Julian with all the history. There's a haunted Julian hotel down the road. I've already been down there. You know what? I don't think we have a video of that. We'll do one of those next. But come on over here. Let's take a look at the Julian Hotel is famous for its ghost stories. The cemetery at the other side of the street, cemetery down that way, I think about a mile. Obviously, there are ghost stories there. But I want to take a look at a lesser known building, historic building here. This used to be City Hall. What's Julian Realty now. And let's get close to it. I'll show you a mural that's related to some local ghost stories and to a really interesting local figure. Let's come check it out. Now this is a realty office now, and let's get up to the window. What I want to show you is this little mural running along the top of the wall, and it's still here. So let's get real close to the window. Let's take a look, see if we can zoom in here. You'll see this mural showing Old West scenes. Now this mural was painted in the early 1900s by Marshall South. Marshall South was a very interesting man, born in Australia, I believe. He's a British citizen, but he moved out to the American West, and he had this dream of living the way people used to live out here. He called it primitive living. And I think that's about all we can see. Let's get over to this other window. Here we are. Yeah, here's some more of this mural. Actually, you see the Mexican eagle on the cactus there. He's got a pre-Hispanic pyramid there. A lot of nods to Mexico's indigenous history. So Marshall South, he was fascinated with the indigenous way of life out here in the California desert. And so he moved his family out. He moved his family out here to the desert, and they lived up in the mountains of the Anza-Borrego Desert, not too far from here. But Julian, the town of Julian, this was like when they needed to come to civilization, this is where they would come. They had a car, they would drive down the bumpy dirt road, they would come here to the town of Julian, but they lived out there, and they lived off the grid, they lived self-sufficiently, they tried to anyway. They couldn't always do it, so they would have to come in here and buy canned foods and goods and water. Water was always a constant headache. But he moved his whole family, his wife and their children. They all lived out there. They usually didn't wear clothes. And they built an adobe house, and they tried to live from the native plants that grow out there and hunting animals. And he had this dream of going back to the old way of living. Now, he's got some ghost stories connected to him, because the Vallecito stagecoach stop, the stage house out in the desert, he went out there with his wife. They spent the night out there. They camped out by the old stage house, and they heard horse hooves. They heard the thundering of horses galloping past. And a lot of people say that stage house is haunted. Now, some people even say that this building is haunted, this building where he painted his mural, because his life ended in kind of a tragic way, a really depressing, melancholy way. He and his wife, they eventually separated. His wife, she couldn't stand that way of life anymore, and I'm sure they had plenty of differences that were exacerbated by the fact that they're trying to live off the land in the desert. So his wife filed for divorce, she took the kids, and then he was just penniless. So he was a writer. He wrote for a desert magazine, I believe. He would write articles about his life in the desert. But once his family wasn't there anymore, he didn't have that source of income. He wrote a few novels, tried to sell some more novels, but eventually, I believe he ended up sleeping right in here. This was either the city hall or the post office back then, but he would sleep on a cot. The town would just let him set a cot up there, and then he painted that mural up on the top of those old walls, of the original walls of this building. And he finished his last days just living as a semi-homeless man here in Julian, broke, no money, no more family anymore. So it's a really sad way for somebody who at the time was just so admired by thousands of people, readers who read his article in that magazine. and admired the gutsiness of going out into the desert and trying to live that old-fashioned way. And so somebody who had been in the public eye for so long, his life came to that anticlimactic end, and I think eventually he got tuberculosis or something, got sick, and died in a hospital near Julian somewhere here. So Marshall South, the man who tried to get back to nature with his family, that's his mural up at the top. I'm glad it still survives. Some people say more than just the mural survived. They say there's still a presence here, and people will hear footsteps and knocks inside this building. Maybe the sound of the ghost of a man who still feels like he could have done more with his life, and feels like his dream didn't come to fruition the way that he thought it could. The story of Marshall South right here in Julian, California.